Welcome back to the Foundr podcast. What if I told you Shark Tank's most successful investment is now worth $3.4 billion? Well, today's guests, David Heath and Randy Goldberg, are the co-founders of Bombas, the sock company that turned comfort and purpose into a global movement. In this episode, you'll hear how a simple insight about homelessness sparked their mission, the scrappy steps they took to bootstrap from an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign to a multi-billion-dollar brand, and their playbook for scaling a D2C business profitably in an era where customer acquisition is more expensive than ever. So if you've wondered how to blend profit with purpose and scale without losing focus, this is an absolute masterclass you do not want to miss.
Hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr podcast with Nathan Chan.
First question I ask everyone that comes on is, how did you guys get your job? AKA, how did you find yourself doing the work you're doing today?
It does feel like a job sometimes. It's funny to say that, you know?
Yeah,
It's like,
I don't ever really think
sometimes
of this as our job, right?
well, sometimes I feel like I work for a different person every week at the company. Or it's like, God, this week it really feels like I work for Kate or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I think our stories are shockingly somewhat similar. My story is that I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad's an entrepreneur, first generation immigrant. I watched him build a business in the basement of our house into a multi-million-dollar business over 35 years. He just retired at 75. And I think whether through genealogy or osmosis, I was destined to be an entrepreneur. I was the kid in the neighborhood who, had lemonade stands, walked dogs, cleaned gutters, anything I could do to hustle for a buck. When I was little, I would do. And then, when it was time to go to college, I went to school for entrepreneurship, majored in management and entrepreneurship and marketing. And I think I kind of always knew that eventually I wanted to start and run my own company. I didn't have kind of the eagerness like right out of school to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to go and do. Or, I've got some great, crazy idea. I think I was like, I want to go work for startups and like learn what it's like to be a part of a fast growing early stage company. And I think that path ultimately led me to meeting Randy, where we were both early stage employees at a media startup. And I'll let him share his story.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was sort of similar for me in that my parents owned a business together. My father was an entrepreneur. And then I guess I had that bug early on. I washed cars and shoveled snow around the neighborhood. But I didn't major in entrepreneurship like Dave. I didn't really, I don't know. I guess I didn't think it was going to be part of my career path. And I mean, Dave probably knew it when he met me, but maybe I didn't. I don't know. I think we're both pretty entrepreneurially minded. But I worked in the ad world as a copywriter and a strategist, and built my career that way after some other weird right and left turns. But we ended up, like Dave said, working at a company together, and we just became friends. I think a shared outlook on the world and appreciation for similar things, although coming at the work from different disciplines, we made us like good friends and good potential partners. And I think there was a moment where we were like, yeah, we're going to do something together at some point. Not sure what it is. It wasn't socks. That wasn't we have to start a sock company. Like that's not, I don't think anyone grows up dreaming of that. Right. But, I think you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, ideas come from anywhere, right?
So how did this idea come about? How did you guys start Bombas Socks?
Yeah. So, as Randy mentioned, we became kind of fast friends and, spent 5 years working together. And I think during that period of time, we had this kind of shared experience at this fast growing organization and commiserated over the things that we thought were done poorly and celebrated the things we thought were done great. But we found ourselves oftentimes eating lunch together, going to the gym together. And I think when you spend a lot of time with somebody, especially if you're interested in entrepreneurship, just the randomness of ideas start flowing, right? And you're like, what if we sold popsicles to just children? I'm like, I don't know. So like, these weird, you're like, what? That already exists. It's called an ice cream truck. You're like, oh, right. Bad idea. Um, but you keep your eyes open
Are
and your
you
ears
claiming to
open,
have had the idea for the ice cream truck? Is that
you know, no bad idea to brainstorm. Um, and so we walked around, I think, with our eyes open, our ears to the ground, and always looking for opportunity. And I think, like all things in life, opportunity strikes when you least expect it. And I was scrolling on Facebook one day, and I came across a post that said socks are the number one most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. And I remember immediately feeling both surprised and sad. I was like, that's upsetting that an item of clothing that I personally have never spent more than a few seconds a day thinking about is perceived as a luxury item for hundreds of thousands of people here in the United States, and even more so abroad. And I remember going over to Randy's desk and sharing the quote with him, and seeing kind of a similar, look come over his face. And at that moment, we weren't like, "We've got it. We're going to do a one for one stock company." I think we sat with it. We were like, "What can we do? Let's go out and buy some socks." And so we carried some socks around in our bags to and from work and handed them out. And this is early 2011, and I think the light bulb went off when we kind of connected the growth that Tom's Shoes had been experiencing. They were in their fifth year of business, doing hundreds of millions of dollars. Warby Parker had just launched, and took the one for one shoe idea from Tom's and applied it to eyewear. And we were like, maybe this is the solve. Maybe we can donate a pair of socks for every pair of socks that we sell. But never had aspirations of like it being this massive thing. We're like, this should be a fun little hobby. Maybe we'll create some cool, fun socks like on our path to our real business, idea. Um, and yeah, we just started working on it. And as they always say, like the rest is history.
Hey Founder fam, I want to take a quick break from the conversation to talk to you about something super exciting. We're officially partnered with Omnisend, the email marketing and SMS platform built specifically for e-commerce founders. We've been recommending Omnisend to founder students for a while now because it just works. Whether you're launching your first store or you're scaling to 7 figures, it really helps you automate your marketing and get real results. Did you know on average, Omnisend customers make $68 for every $1 they spend, which is an insanely good return on investment. And because you're part of the Foundr community, you get 50% off your first 3 months with the code FOUNDR50. Just head to omnisend.com/founder without the E to get started. All right, now let's jump back into the show. Yeah, wild. So Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, you guys raised $140,000 on there. What happened next? Like, how did that happen? Was that the pilot to launch and to really validate the product, or you guys had already got some validation and traction?
Well, I guess we had validation from like our parents and some friends and some strangers at the gym, but this was our first, public moment with the product. That was the whole point of it was, all right, let's see if some strangers are interested in this idea. And we always say like when we wrote the script for the video for our Indiegogo campaign, that was kind of the writing the covenant of the Bombas brand. Like we took 3 months probably to write that script, and we would probably take 3 hours to do something like that now. But at the time, it was the wrenching work of making sure everything was in the right order and the ideas were written down and memorialized the right way. And that was an important step for us. And it gave us confidence. And then we had that video, and we worked that campaign like it was a full-time job. A lot of elbow grease to create the success in that campaign. And that got us to a point where we had a couple thousand people who had believed in it and who had signed up. And the nice thing about that was we got those email addresses, and we launched our website from there. and we got it live and we go, okay, now what? So that's sort of a moment. I think I talked to a lot of founders where they have that, they're fighting hard for something and then that happens. And then you go, oh, right. Like now what? And how do you get people to come shop here? And we're like, okay, what we know email. We worked at a company that was pretty good at email. We've got this list. Let's start there and let's build it. And let's be smart about where we spend our money because we don't have any. And let's think about the things that all four founders do really well. And let's use those skill sets as sort of free labor until we can afford to hire more people. And it's just a lot of the early work, I think, looks the same at a lot of companies where you're pushing really hard on things that seem so important, and further into it you get, those things become easier and it becomes secondhand, and you're building work on work that you don't even realize you're doing. And you're building hopefully the foundation of something great that's appreciated in the marketplace, and good timing and has a good fit, and you get a little lucky and you're a little good, and you surround yourself with really smart people and advisors. And that was sort of the early days. I think sometimes we would look back and be like, wow, we got a lot done, and it felt like things were moving really slowly.
And I don't think we can underscore that time in the business enough, because I think, you know, everybody thinks, look from the outside looking in, oh, it's a total overnight success, right? Like they just hit it out of the park or they got lucky. And yeah, luck did play a part along the way. But, I think one of the greatest tragedies to happen to kind of entrepreneurship over the last, 10 years is this idea that like anybody with a idea on the back of a napkin can go raise $1 million for an idea. And it's especially harder for those that don't have the means or the network or the access. And we did this the old fashioned way, right? We like bootstrapped out of the gate. We built an Indiegogo campaign for $5,000. We like put our money together. We stayed up late, worked on weekends while we had jobs, putting this campaign together, and then even then, once we had initial traction and success, everyone was like, oh, so you're going to go out and raise money. You're going to raise money. And we're like, no, we got to like see if people, when they get the product, do they come back and buy the product? Do they tell their friends about the product? How can we like get as far as we can without like, putting anything into this, from a monetary standpoint, and before we had done about $500,000 in our first, 5 months before we had decided, all right, like now we feel like we have validation. We've talked to customers. The feedback is amazing. People want more from us. Um, you know, and we really did. We hustled it out. Like we did it the old fashioned way. And, and I think that's a key cornerstone to even the way that we grew this company. I mean, a lot of D2C brands, particularly, you look at, they've raised 30, 40, 80, 100, $200 million. And we've built our entire business on $4 million of capital raised, the million of our seed funding and $4 million in Series A. Mind you, from no venture funds, no institutional capital. All of it was kind of, small checks from, an angel network of different people that I went out and made myself. So we kind of built this thing brick by brick, the old fashioned way. So, you don't need access to tons and tons of capital early on in order to get proof of concept.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for being so open and honest about this, because I'm a big fan of bootstrapping too. And I'm curious, with your guys' one-for-one model, how do you, like in those early days, how did you balance that desire to give back, but while remaining profitable? Were there many mistakes early days that you could perhaps share with this model? Because, as you said, you guys were bootstrapped and haven't raised much capital.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a little bit of this was luck in terms of the margin structure of the category that we're in, but from day one, we were donating a product for every product that we sold. It was not, there was no chance that we would compromise that. We understood the power of that. Um, and we started this business to help solve a problem in our community. So if we weren't donating, it wouldn't be Bombas, right? It just couldn't, these things, it couldn't exist without it. So when we would meet an investor who would say, how you're giving away half of my profits by donating a pair, like Mr. Wonderful said on Shark Tank, or a lot of people said this to us along the way. Like, if I had to be honest, like, I don't know how the donation model scales, but we built it into the unit economics from the beginning. I like to think of it like learning a foreign language, right? Like, the earlier you learn it, like when you're a kid, the easier it is and the more fluent you are at it. And, you can't remove it later on. You just know French or whatever. So it's the same thing because we started so early, because it's so foundational to who we are. you know, the business benefits are clear to us. It's a flywheel for our business. The idea of what it is, it's why people are a lot of our customers. It's the number one reason people purchase our products. It's sort of like it is who we are. So we couldn't, the investors who got it, and that was that. And those are our people. And for us, it was just profitability had to come with that included. There was no way around it. So that just made us figure it out. And listen, if we weren't able to figure that out, we wouldn't be sitting here today. It wouldn't be like we would have abandoned it and just been a sock company, with crazy designs or something like that. That wasn't interesting to us.
Yeah, so it sounds like that is the core, and you guys just made it work.
Yeah, I
100%.
think, it's interesting. Along the way, we've come up against a number of challenges. And I think, again, I look back at our fundraising strategy, and because we only took capital when we knew that we could take capital that we could spend to get an ROI and return on investment, whether it was through marketing or through headcount, we weren't doing it to solve problems with our business, right? We said, okay, if there is a fundamental challenge that we have with the business, like, we have to be able to solve it without money, or else, like, we're just going to keep going back to that well every time we have a problem, right? And I think it's the trap that a lot of venture funded businesses fall into. It just becomes the easy way out, right? Oh, let's go try this thing. We spend a bunch of money on it, didn't work, let's go raise more money, let's try a bunch of things. It's like, when you're actually bootstrapped, like, and your dollars matter, you take the time and caution to really try to, like, scenario plan, or what we call like war games, right? Internally, you run it on a model where you, like, talk it through to ad nauseum, to you're like, I feel like we are convicted in kind of the right direction. And do you always get it right? No, but, like, the more time you take, especially in those early days, to, like, face challenges and think about how can you build structure or process, or a fundamental approach to how to get past these challenges rather than just throwing money at the problem, it makes you a better business, and it also trains that muscle so that when you do get big, we're sitting here with a rather large balance sheet, and it just keeps growing because, like, it's not our instinct to just say, like, all right, let's go spend some money on it. See, like, we're like, let's do the hard work. Let's dig deep and find the answer ourselves.
And like the timing matters there too, right? If you have a mandate to grow super quickly, that's, like from a VC investor, y- it could make it challenging not to go chase after some of those opportunities and not to focus on the thing that you're great at and getting better at it. And that's where I think not having that pressure, allowing to take the time and make the mistakes that we made, build the things the way we wanted to build it, go a little slower, figure out when we needed to move a little faster. And like ultimately, could we have grown faster? I don't know. Maybe we've been very fast growth company for the last 8 years. So there's probably I think we're the sort of proof that you don't have to try and speed through everything and return someone's money immediately. And, that creates the kind of pressure that creates mistakes, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, I love how you talk about this idea of these constraints, so you just have to make it work and you don't have anything to fall back on. Um, I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit about Shark Tank and that experience. Can you take us through what that process looked like in the early stages?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of those moments of luck. But again, I think we created this scenario in which, luck decided to knock on our door. Um, we randomly got an email one day, and it was like Shark Tank casting 40321 at gmail.com. And I was like, this feels like a scam. And they're like, hey, would you be interested in applying for Shark Tank? And I shared it with Randy, and I was like, this can't be real. And he's like, just reply. Let's see. And so we replied. And it turns out they use like freelance, casting agents. And they said they were like, hey, we discovered your Indiegogo campaign. We love the mission. We love the brand. Clearly you had some success. You and Randy seem really comfortable on camera. Like, we'd love for you guys to skip the kind of formal audition process and like move into the casting process. And we were like, there's no way this is real. Like, to think back at this moment, we're on a conference call with these people, and, you know, every call, it got realer and realer, over kind of a 4-month period. And it just kind of consumed us at the time. But again, I think we were really pragmatic about it in the way that we were like, look, if this happens, great. But the likelihood of us actually filming and then actually airing and then actually getting a deal, like, we're not going to bet our business on it. Let's just like approach this the way that we approach everything else, get super prepared, know our information, give it the best shot we can, but like, set ourselves up to run a great business without it. Right? And I think this is another lesson for early entrepreneurs that I hear far too often, is that like, they think that if they just get that one break, that like that's all they need, right? And they're like, if I can just get on Oprah's favorite things, or if Justin Bieber just sends one tweet about my company, or if I get, it's like, all right, well, you can't bank your company's success on whether you capture lightning in a bottle, randomly. So similarly, I think, we were just like, all right, let's do it like we always do, prepared incredibly well, did our research, watched a ton of episodes, saw the ones that did well, saw the ones that didn't, um, and just like grinded it out, and really did our homework and walked into it. Um, Ended up, in the tank, we got a deal, but weren't sure if they were going to air our episode, because they're like, we won't tell you if it's going to air until 2 weeks before. So like, just wait and see, and maybe it won't at all. And then 2 weeks before the season premiere, we got a phone call. They were like, your episode's going to air. We were like, cool, we are not ready for this at all. We had like a janky little website, we had like no team. Um, we went from 0 customer service. I was our customer service person, to like ramping up 40 freelance customer service people like overnight. It was intense.
And our site still crashed. And our
and our
site still
site
crashed.
many times. But it was an awesome experience. I mean, we did 900,000 in sales pre-Shark Tank in the first year, and then in 2 months we did 1.8 million. It was a massive growth engine for us at the time. Sold out of all of our inventory. They ended up re-airing our episode on Black Friday. It was a massive moment for us in the company. I think a big catalyst, from a momentum standpoint, for helping us kind of get off the ground.
Yeah, wow.
You asked about the early part of it as well. The process of preparing for that show was a very helpful process for the business in general. And I think if you're a young founder or a young entrepreneur and you have a business that's growing, I think pretending that you are about to go on to Shark Tank in like a month
Totally.
is a very good exercise, because we had to confront the possibility that they could ask us anything they want on national television, and we had to have an answer for it. So if there was something that we weren't talking about or weren't addressing because it was a touchy subject, or
Such a
we
good
would
point.
deal with it later, then we had to stand there and talk about it amongst ourselves in case they asked, are you full time? We only want full time people on it. Whatever the question is that you're not addressing with your co-founders or with your employees, going through an exercise, certainly you force yourself to talk about everything in a series of interviews, even with other people in your company. I think that would be very useful. That was super helpful for us. Even if we never made it to air, I think it helped us address some of the things that would have been issues later on.
Totally. Great point.
Gold. Okay, so can you tell us about your relationship with Daymond, and what is the best piece of advice that he's ever given you?
Yeah, our relationship is great. He's been an incredible mentor and friend to us. Interestingly enough, I think, he spotted us early on and was like, you guys have, all of the things that are great about your direct to consumer business are all the things that I see wrong with running a wholesale business, which is, what he had kind of, been known for. And so every time we kind of called, asked for advice, he's like, you're the new generation, you're the experts, like, keep leaning into what you're doing. That being said, I think there was a couple moments in the company where we wanted to, maybe expand into other things faster, whether it was, selling into wholesale stores or moving into new product categories. And, he was just like, guys, your business is growing, 400% year over year. He's like, just keep doubling down on what you're doing. It's like, stay focused, stay diligent, and just keep doing the thing that like you're doing really well. Like that's what's gonna continue to, fuel your growth, for the future. And if you ever find yourself in a point where growth is slowing, then we can talk about these other options. But like, don't be distracted. Like, if it's working for you, just like keep going at it.
And then he always says something like rise and grind, or one of his like book titles.
Oh, that's cool. So just wrapping and rounding out the Shark Tank piece, what advice would you give to founders or any entrepreneur that is thinking about or wanting to go on Shark Tank?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Randy summarized it well. Is that like, be prepared. Go through the exercise, and whether you get on it or don't get on it, it's again a kind of amount going on Shark Tank to, like saying like, okay, well, I want Bieber to tweet about me. It's like, it's not something you can control. Even if you get into the application and screening process, I mean, how, about 7 times every call that we had with them, they're like, just because we're talking about this doesn't mean you're going to get on the show. Like, they were really, really careful. And look, we showed up to set with 140 other businesses, and they're like, by tomorrow, 70 of you will be gone. And by the next day, another 30 of you will be gone. So like, even people that they flew out to LA to pitch would get cut. So, go through the exercise, know your business incredibly well, inside out, have the hard conversations, talk about the things that you might be avoiding, and then apply and hopefully you get on as a crapshoot. But I think knowing your business, again, as Randy said, is probably the best piece of advice we can give you.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. Now, the truth is, all successful e-commerce founders started from zero, with a spark of an idea and a whole lot of determination. But let's be real, building or growing an e-commerce business is no walk in the park. And that's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. It's a culmination of a decade worth of work at Foundr. So if you're feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, you're lacking confidence to move forward, or you're worried about making costly mistakes or not knowing how to grow your business, Foundr Plus is here to support you on your journey. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, incredible programs, a supportive community, weekly live mentorship, exclusive savings on startup tools, and 24/7 real human support. Try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back in the show. Yeah, okay. Switching gears just around e-com, direct to consumer. Obviously, you guys started around the time when Shopify and a lot of e-commerce business were starting to pop up. Now, if you fast forward almost 10 years later, that is rampant, right? So I'm sure you guys speak to a lot of early stage e-com D2C founders. Like, what is the biggest mistake you believe people are making, or the most common that you're seeing?
I mean, I can jump in. I think that one of the biggest mistakes is that anybody believes that, just because something is not sold online, that like, that's their opportunity. It's like, guys, there's no branded direct-to-consumer basketball company. Like, we're going to be the biggest direct-to-consumer basketball company. It's like, all right, like that just be like, you can't put like direct-to-consumer in front of a product and then think it's revolutionary. I think the other thing too, which we're seeing, at scale, is like the when we started in this interesting like moment where the Facebook advertising algorithm was starting to get sophisticated enough where it was powerful, but it wasn't widely adopted, so it was cheap, right? When we were first spending money on Facebook, we were getting CPAs for like $2 to $6 to acquire a customer. You go out today, just starting today, you're in the like 20s and 30s. So brands need to spend so much more to kind of get to that point of finding out who their customer is or what ad works. I mean, we had a tremendous amount of runway from just being able to test very, very cheaply on Facebook to hone in and say like, okay, this type of customer responds well to this customer responds well to that. If we tweak the copy here, we're going to see an increase in conversion rate. But it was so cheap that it didn't cost us a lot to figure that out. If you 10x the cost of that, we would have run through capital so much faster, and probably wouldn't have been able on the small budget that we had to get to that proof point of figuring out where our customer buckets were that we could then more efficiently lean in and really pump the scale on. I think they think that, I think what we benefit from today is our size and scale, where we have access to data and tools, and we're working in the Facebook disruptors group. They're giving us access to new ad tools and platforms, and we've got teams dedicated to figuring out within the matter of minutes if a piece of advertising creative is going to work or not. And so we've kind of crossed the chasm, and again, I think we benefit from a category that has high margin, is a low considered purchase, decision. So, easy for sizing, available to everybody. So I think that's some of the pitfalls that people fall out today is they think, oh, Bombas is selling socks at scale. Well, I can sell toothbrushes or, hairbrushes or any other brushes.
The brushes and ice cream trucks, just right.
Yeah. All day, every day.
It's a challenging environment. We talk often, if we were starting over right now, we wouldn't do it the same way. It would have to be completely different. So we're actually looking at the next generation of companies who are reinventing how to find their customer base, how to market themselves. Because there was a model in direct consumer brands where it was raise a bunch of VC money, dump it into a Facebook, just transferring money from VC to Silicon Valley, transferring money to try and build up a customer base at a certain price. And then you run out of money and you raise more money, and there's pressures that we talked about earlier. We avoided one part of that and not the other part. We had a lot of success with the other part, but it's a different environment now. So, companies are getting smart and figuring out new ways to find an audience, new ways to like grind out like the brand, like customer by customer, and being smarter about it. And now we're trying to learn some of that new language, in addition to capitalizing on our momentum.
Yeah. Blazing your own path here is, looking at the moment that you're starting and figuring out what's the angle. How many times, Randy, along the years did you have people be like, oh, your million pair video, which was this video we shot, ended up being a Facebook case study, has, over 100 million views online across all platforms. People are like, hey, can I get the name of the director for that video? I want to create that video for our brand. And I'm like, no, it's done. It's over. Like, you can't just do what somebody else just did and expect the same results. Like, no one could look at the Dollar Shave Club video and be like, I'm going to do exactly that, but for my brand, and have it work. Because the consumer is like, no, bro, that's already been done before. Like, you're not authentic. You're not real. You're not doing your own thing. And so, like,
It's like a sequel, right, Dave?
Totally.
Right? Like how many sequels are better than the original? Maybe one, two.
Yeah.
Like, like you got to do something new.
And even worse when they're kind of like blatant ripoffs. And we just saw it. And people would be like, I don't get it. We did the same thing you did and it's not working. I'm like, exactly. Like you got to do something different.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point that you make. So I'm curious, like in terms of channels now for you guys, obviously Facebook ads, it sounds like you guys are doing quite well. Organic, YouTube ads, like what are other channels that are working for you guys right now?
It's funny. It's like the same kind of mentality. We want to look to where there are opportunities and spaces that people wouldn't think about, like what are we're a new direct to consumer company. Okay, let's advertise on the radio, right? Let's send out direct mailers. Let's see what TV looks like for us. Let's explore these places. Like let's create partnerships with very few select retailers, even though we're a direct to consumer company, and meet their customers where they are, right? Like we want to find where people are spending their time and creating space and intentionality in their day and be there to like provide them with the right message at the time and let them know that we will be supporting them. That's what we do as a brand. We go and find people where they are and we support them. So we have the traditional success, Facebook, Instagram. We're exploring all the new digital platforms and testing and learning in those places as well. But we're not afraid to do, things that seem a little bit, I don't know, like older or left of center or experimental, just to try and find customers and, make people like put some Bombas in front of them, see what happens.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so when it comes to your mission, how would you recommend founders communicate that to their consumers in the early days? What should they be thinking about when it comes to that? Because your guys, you have a really strong and really purposeful mission, but I think a lot of early stage founders, that's something they don't really approach the best way, or haven't really worked out and they just want to make money.
Yeah. I think Randy touched on this before, right? Like, I think so why it was so successful for us, but also why it was so easy for us is it was built into the DNA of the company, right? It was the spark that ultimately lit the flame. We didn't sit there saying like, we want to build, a multi-million dollar sock company. And oh, by the way, let's try a way to give back. We were like, hey, there's a problem in our community. How can we solve this? Oh, we like business. Oh, maybe business can help solve this problem. So it was very organic and authentic. If that moment doesn't hit you right away, I think, you know, really digging deep on the kind of or pulling on the authenticity thread, I think is super important, right? Like get close to something and figure out like, how it can create meaning to you personally, right? I think if you're able to connect to it personally, one of the things that we do at Bombas is we require every new employee we give them 10 pairs of socks on the first day that they start. And this is more obviously in the in-person environment. And being in New York City, we'd say, hey, you're probably going to encounter someone in the homeless community to and from your way to work. Hand them a pair of socks, if they need it, offer them, start a conversation. And everybody comes back and they all have these very unique, beautiful stories of, I didn't realize, how simply just saying hi to somebody could change their day. Or this guy who I see sitting on the block, I thought he was a drug addict, but it turns out that his wife is really sick and, he has to raise some money to take care of her. Like whatever these stories are, which Randy and I had, I think early on, because we said like, okay, let's carry socks around us. And we had these individual moments that were just like, I mean, I literally get goosebumps just thinking about it, that like, I can't shake these stories. Right. And that allows me to show up super authentically every single day. There's a coconut ice cream company that I invested in. And she was like, look, I really want to have a mission and, maybe I can, do this or do that. And I was like, try to find a way to like cohesively connect it naturally for the consumer, right? Uh, if you're a coconut ice cream company, don't give blankets to dog shelters, right? Like that would be like, what? That doesn't make sense at all. But I was like, do some research, figure out like where maybe there's a point in your supply chain that like you can help. And it turns out coconut farmers are, typically in third world countries, wildly poor, She went there, realized that they work to try to break the poverty cycle by sending their kids to, school, and hopefully their kids will get educated because they didn't have that opportunity. And so then she came back and she's like, all right, we're going to donate a part of our proceeds to help provide, books and school supplies to our coconut farmers, right? That makes a lot of sense for the consumer, right? When they see the plaque on the wall, when they walk into the store, it makes a ton of sense. And it's an easy story for people to tell. And she can tell it because she's like, I went there, I found this out. It wasn't like, oh, I Googled like how to give back. Like that's not going to resonate with anybody. So you've got to make it personal. You've really got to go out there. Don't just look something up online that sounds good. Like if it's interesting, go volunteer, go get close to it. Talk to, we didn't know how to donate a pair of socks. So like we called a homeless shelter and we were like, hey, is this sock thing a real problem? And they were like, it's a tremendous problem. We can't get enough. And we're like, well, what if we created a company where we sent you socks whenever we sold them that you could hand out to the homeless community? They were like, that would be amazing. Right. So like, we understood the problem, right? And that allowed us to talk about the problem to our customers, to our employees, to our partners in such an authentic and genuine way that they then bought into it because like they wanted to be a part of that story and that journey.
Yeah. Dave, you're bringing back some memories with Hammer Socks, which is amazing. I also think it's just so important to be able to weave it into the core narrative of your company. If you really mean it, it shouldn't be like off to the side, like a department or something you talk about occasionally. Make it part of your core narrative. When we say one purchased equals one donated, like that is core to who we are, right? Like this has always been the way it is for us. And Dave was really big on this early on, is we wanted to make our story so easy to understand that our customers would be out there like telling the story on our behalf. And they didn't have to study it to do it. We just tried to simplify the message and then be really consistent about it. Dave always says like, our product is great, our mission is authentic, but the order in the way people tell it is they'll go to a party and they'll say, have you heard of this sock company, Bombas? Do you know socks are the most requested clothing item in homeless shelters? They donate a pair for every pair you buy. Oh, and by the way, they're the most comfortable socks I've ever worn, and t-shirts and underwear and slippers. If you haven't tried some of our newer products. But this is what they would say. And that's like the order that it would go in. It wasn't just about, so both parts are important and both parts make the other part of the story better. And if you have something like that, where the two pieces of it, your mission and your product support each other, that's powerful and can be exponential if it's done the right way.
Yeah, you've got to find the thing that's memorable and easy, right? And like Randy said, if you showed up to a dinner party and were like, hey, I bought these comfortable socks, you'd be like, cool, you're never invited to my house again. Why are you talking to me about comfortable socks? But if you like brought the mission into it, you'd be like, oh, right. And then like you see our commercial or you hear somebody else talk about it, you're like, oh, right, that sounds familiar, right? It's not, oh, just that comfortable sock company, right? That could be a lot of sock companies, right? We just happen to be the most comfortable, but our mission is the thing that really sticks with people because that's the thing that we uniquely own that nobody else in our category can own.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, guys. This will
Thanks,
help a lot of
Nathan.
people. You've got incredible experiences. So thank you so much for your time.
Very nice
Won't take
meeting
any
you.
more of it.
Awesome.
Hey guys, if you love this episode, you've got to check out my interview with Davey Fogarty on how he finds trends in undercapitalized markets and turns them into multi-million-dollar businesses.
I'm generally looking for trends globally. We find trends that haven't been kind of capitalized in certain markets or in certain marketing channels.
Yes.
And then we also obviously add our flair to it. You need to differentiate your product